Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this afternoon session, and this is more on how to win at remarketing in the future. And this clearly involves electric vehicles. As we've seen this morning through incentives from government or other things, or also to meet CO2 targets in the future. Now, in the previous sessions, experts already touched upon the challenges of this powertrain mix and how this might create a supply-demand balance, which might be maybe a bit of oversupply, which might have an impact on used car values. So I would like to go further and invite two experts. I will have them on the screen in a second. And I would like to invite Christoph Engelskirchen, who is the CEO, its chief economist officer of Autovista Group, and Mr. Leonard Hinrichs from Twace. And they will explain directly what they do in a very short introduction. If you could welcome, and Christoph, maybe you could start very quick.
Yes, thank you, Johan. So Autovista Group is Europe's leading pricing specialist for new and used car markets, and comprehensive pricing and specification data, as well as the used car market observations. They represent the foundation of our products and services.
Great. Leonard.
Thank you, Johan. Yes. Thanks for being here. Twice is the leading predictive analytics software provider. Leading has just been confirmed by McKinsey and Handelsblatt in Germany, at least for the German space. So we are very grateful for that. Ultimately, what we're doing is creating a software that can help our clients both in the development and the operation, creating transparency on the current health of the battery and the future development. Ultimately, we're the kind of the one-stop shop for anything to do with batteries.
Okay, great. Let's get started straight away. And for the afternoon sessions, ladies and gentlemen, we've done a bit of a different setup. So with the advisory board, we've created X amount of questions that we will actually pose to both experts, and they will reply to this. So it's a bit of a guided Q&A, but you can still answer or ask any questions as well. Now, I don't know, Christoph, if you have seen the poll where we've asked whether used car customers have confidence these days in the state of health of the BEV. This is not so promising, although that some people say certainly, mostly yes, but we would like to hear your view. And maybe as well, explain us a bit, what is the main challenge we are highlighting here in this session?
Yeah, thank you, Johan. It's, I mean, the polls are very lively, and they give a good, good pulse check on what people think. I mean, what we wanted to have a description of what the main challenge is and why we are here presenting to everyone our view of the market. And we wanted to start with a bit of a theory which is quite well known actually, and it's called the market of lemons. And the market of lemons is a market where buyers cannot assess the quality of a product. Yeah, for example, a battery, they don't know the quality of the battery and the quality of a product, and people might tell them something, but they have no way to validate it. Yeah? And the classic example for this outside of our industry are hotel rooms, but obviously also the used car, where you have very limited access to information unless you are an expert of the topic. And the thing that's happening here is that it's a vicious circle, and lower quality is created because you're not getting credit for better quality, because people do not believe you, and they cannot assess that better quality. So the quality deteriorates, willingness to pay becomes lower because the buyer expects the quality to deteriorate, and vicious circle. So what's the way out of this? And the way out of it is signaling. another technical term, but I think everybody knows exactly what is meant by that. So the power of signals is, for example, a star rating on a platform like Booking.com, which people really place a lot of value in. And they're willing to pay more money if something has more stars. And the same holds true for used car programs. That's why everybody has used car programs with used car brands. And it also relates to quality of the battery. And this is what we're going to talk to you in a second.
Thanks. So that's a good introduction of this session. Leonard, before I want to get into a bit more detail, there is one thing I wanted to ask you. I read in a white paper that you've brought as well, and that is about oversizing of battery packs. You've analyzed this, and I think it's quite important for the further discussion that we'll do. Can you explain a bit what is happening in the market?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the term oversizing, sometimes they also say overstacking of batteries. The essential idea is that you make the battery bigger than the part of energy that you're actually using. And this is kind of especially important when we're looking at the first part of our proposition at Twice, where we said, like, okay, we have OEMs develop better battery packs, because what we see quite extensively in the market, and it's also showing why some American manufacturers might be having a lot further range than European manufacturers, is that there's a very conservative setup of the battery. So the actual usable energy or capacity from a battery is less than what is in the battery. Reasons for that is a multitude. There's some technical reasons why you have sensor inaccuracies that you want to compensate for, to just have a safety margin. Obviously, not obviously, but if you're familiar with aging of batteries, the further you are to the boundary conditions, so 0% SOC, state of charge, or 100% SOC, the more harming that is for the battery, so the more aging occurs. And that's what you want to prevent. And in addition to that, for the end user, I mean, the range of an electric vehicle, and I think everyone is very familiar with that topic, is a range anxiety everywhere, at least in Germany. So the range is the essential part for the customer. So what the OEMs want to achieve here is that you don't see a rapidly decrease, or not a decreasing range over time. So with time, they provide you with more usable capacity. So the actual amount of energy from the battery that you're using is increased over time. We see like very, shall we say, extreme scenarios. One bus manufacturer from Germany said they're only using 65% of their battery. Reason being that municipal companies, so bus companies, they would rather have a constant range over 8 years than a longer range at the beginning and a decreasing range over time. So they're actually expanding that range over the time. So we see varying degrees of this kind of oversizing between manufacturers, but that's obviously then also in this kind of market of lemons, it's a bit difficult to assess like how much of this overcapacity has actually been already provided to the end user and how much hasn't. So in terms of how much range will I have in 1 or 2 years, this can be a bit misleading.
Yeah, I can only agree, and I thought it was quite important for this because this is not creating more transparency, basically, around it. Now, in quite some discussions and projects that we sometimes have with OEMs, they're also talking, Christoph, then, about as a solution to the uncertainty for customers, they say that extended warranty would solve this. Do you agree on this, Christoph? I can't hear you, Christoph. I don't know.
Sorry about that. So yes, I do agree. Extended warranties are definitely, as you call it, a savior for remarketing BEVs, because they signal. It's a great signal. It's a strong signal to the market that the asset risk, the battery risk, is absorbed by the manufacturer, and consumers should not worry about it. The question is whether this is enough. or whether it's more a requirement because of the big unknowns around battery quality. And if you look at the poll at the moment, more votes are coming in. I mean, please click on polls and just vote. It's super interesting. And at the moment, there is an answer leaning towards probably no, in terms of, do people have confidence in the battery? So yes, battery warranty, extended warranty, is a great feature, is a great signal. And I think it will continue to play a grand role. Yeah, without them, cars in the age of 3 to 4 years would really struggle in terms of being sold to a private individual. Yeah, and but there may be more, and then this is what we talk about today in terms of can we have a battery health certificate? Can we create more upside potential so that the poll results that you're putting in here are getting a bit more positive?
Well, thanks. I'm sure that we would like to have the poll results being better so that we can also increase the value on the used car market, because as we've seen already in other sessions, this is critical or crucial. So if we look at that, it's clear that not every vehicle is the same as it's being sold as a used car. Not every electric vehicle, even from the same brand, same mileage, behaves the same. So question to you, Leonard, is, and I see that this hides a bit the questions, but the battery like to be treated well. Now, what are the aspects that impact this? And I will try and include a few comments in here.
Yeah, sure. I think the question is what constitutes the condition or the quality of a battery. Maybe let's start there for 1 second. So usually you have this parameter that's called the state of health. The state of health is usually an indication for the capacity, which translates into range. That is what most people take for the quality or the status of the battery. There's another component to that is kind of the inner resistance, the impedance. So how much power you can get out of the vehicle or out of the battery at any given time. That is mostly not too dramatic, because electric vehicles, as most of you will know, that if you have ever driven an electric vehicle, have incredible performance and speed. So that's usually not something you would feel. But these two areas are usually impacted. And then you have, towards the end of life, you have a rapid increase of the resistance and decline of the capacity. So the battery becomes unusable, also called end of life. So you want to know when that happens. And what impacts that? I think, that's now the question, and it's a difficult question to answer. There's a multitude of factors that can impact a battery. But in general, there's two areas which we're seeing. That's one is cyclic aging, the other one is calendaric aging. So far, it's quite easy to grasp. I think the one is how much you use the battery, and the other one how old in time it actually is. But these two facts, or these two aging mechanisms, are affected heavily by other topics. If you're looking at cyclic and calendaric, that's usually also what the warranty conditions from the OEMs are. Mostly 160,000 kilometers, which translates to a certain amount of cycles, or 8 years, which obviously is the calendaric age. When we are looking at the cyclic aging first, cycles refer to the amounts of charges and discharges of a battery. And these charges and discharges can be more or less harmful. They can be more or less harmful depending on the ambient temperature. So what temperature is surrounding the actual battery cell, obviously, not so much the vehicle, but that impacts it. That impacts, for example, the thermal management. So how much does the thermal management has to work if you have higher outside temperatures? Or if the vehicle was parked overnight and you have very low temperatures outside, the battery will be very, very cool and needs to be heated up first before being able to be used. So all of that impacts how each cycle is impacting the battery age. If you're then looking at the way that the cycle is used, there's obviously a difference between, say, working in stereotypes here, a person that drives their Golf to work every day, is in a rush hour, is not stressed to get to work, but rather wants to get there really careful use of the vehicle. So not a lot of energy throughput, especially not at high C rates, versus a sports car driver who maybe takes it even to the raceway and drives it around in like mostly full throttle, full brakes, and really puts stress on the battery. So that kind of the using of the battery. And then again, that is also impacted by the surrounding temperatures. It's impacted by the depth of discharge. So is the battery fully charged, or is it fully discharged? Mentioning all of that, I mean, nowadays using a battery, the most stressful event is probably charging itself. I mean, you're trying to charge up the battery within 20 minutes, half an hour to 80%, which you are then using over time. So don't forget about this aspect. It's probably the most stressful event. But maybe leaving this cyclic aging to the side, the other aspect is obviously calendaric aging. And that is also impacted by the way that you park, for example, your battery. If you are the person that really wants availability at all times, you have 100% state of charge at all times. And you might have noticed in your electric vehicles, for example, Tesla does that quite a lot, where they recommend you to only charge it until 90% or 95% to keep the last 5% unloaded, because it's more stressful for the battery to be parked in such a fashion. And this state of charge while being parked, temperature as well, it also impacts how quickly a battery ages with time. And I mean, ultimately what you will see is you'll have less range, you'll have less power available, and that's obviously something that you would like to see from a vehicle. And with a smaller battery, that in fact might be bigger as well. If you have a smaller battery and you're driving for the same mileage, you'll have obviously more cycles, so it might be more stressful. So you also see a difference there, why you cannot just take kind of the mileage and the time, because different battery sizes will have different results, different environments will have different results. That's why it's so important to look at every specific battery, the way that it has been used. And even if you have the entire history, there might be other parameters impacting it, such as the production process. That's why you would need to look at each and every specific battery, see how it's behaving, and run a thorough analysis in order to actually make a statement on the remaining useful lifetime and the capacity that it still has.
Great. I just had a small challenge of unmuting myself. I think that's great. These are all factors. And back to Christoph, this information currently, we see a lot in used car programs or even in certified programs so far. Salesmen don't have the ability to transfer this information. So what does this do between the relationship between a buyer and a seller? And as you see on the screen, those two customers are not really happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, it makes people nervous, right? If they're probably not aware of all these factors and how impactful they can be, and it makes them a bit nervous. And if you move back to this star rating, you know, having the extended warranty probably is like a solid 3-star rating. Yeah, if it's a good warranty, but everything else, like every upside potential, they wouldn't believe, yeah, the person unless there is proof, yeah. So that's what a battery health report from a credible source, audited, would add as a value to avoid these information asymmetry, which is currently in place.
We've had a comment in the chat, Christoph, that the range that's on the vehicle when someone basically buys it, that could be enough for that person. But don't you agree that it's also about the evolution within a year, within 2 years? So including the driving pattern of the used car buyer, if you could project almost what would happen, would that be additional value for the buyer?
Yes, I mean, what I learned from the work with Twice and also TÜV is that it doesn't tell you anything, right? If you buy a used car and it says range left, that doesn't mean anything about what will happen in the next months, in the next years. And also it doesn't, you cannot, I mean, if quality has once been lost, you cannot get it back, right? If you treat the car well as a used car buyer, you cannot recover lost quality in the battery. So the only thing that remains, unless there is something else, is the extended warranty, which again is good. But there is upside potential in terms of residual values if we add another signal to the equation.
Great, thanks. Now let's get back to some data. This is a graph and a treatment analysis that you provided to us. Could you please explain a bit for the audience what it means or what it explains? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to do that. So this is kind of a representation of what I've just mentioned. The way that, and that was the basis for the white paper that we wrote, the way that use behavior, and we've taken everything else here as static. So there was no difference in geography or in the kind of driving patterns in general. But what you see here is 3 different drivers, one having kind of the most aggressive and worst possible treatment of a worse treatment than the average one, then one with a better driving. And that's kind of just capturing these different factors. So you have the general driving style. You have the person that is just having their moments of driving aggressively, but then also being very defensively as the average one. And then the person that you would know maybe from your daily commute that is driving really aggressively, that is almost every day using the motorway, that is then, because they don't have a charger at home, always fast charging the vehicle, has quite a long commute maybe, or is only using the car to drive home on the weekends, but is kind of using a lot of the battery every time, with keeping it at full charge when it's parked. So kind of all the worst things you could think of in terms of cyclic and calendaric aging, as opposed to others, like the better treatment, driving very carefully, using a lot of regenerative braking, almost never fast charging. Motorway, obviously here it's referring to the energy throughput at any given time while driving, and keeping it parked as like on a decent SOC, only charging it as much as is required. And the impact here, and I think that's interesting, what you see to the right is kind of the SOH with regard to capacity over 3 years. So 3 years obviously being the usual time when you would think about remarketing your vehicle. And you always see with these batteries quite a quick drop in the SOC that is then somewhat stabilizing towards a more linear aging behavior. And that differs quite significantly already after 3 years. I mean, this simulation is based on data from real fields combined with laboratory testing. And we saw a difference, I think, cannot read it here, but I think it was something like 5.6 percentage points in the difference in the SOC. And more importantly, what is in the white paper, but not displayed here, the difference was also between 2.5 and 3 years, or actually 4 years of lifetime that this battery was deemed usable before you reach the SOH of 70%, where you usually consider the end of life of a battery. And this is not necessarily visible. I mean, what you can see from a vehicle, it gives you a generic SOH, it gives you a range that can more often than not be a bit misleading, but it does not necessarily tell you what the remaining useful lifetime is, especially if you change the use pattern. Have there been already aging effects that make it impossible to kind of flatten this curve a bit? And understanding this aging behavior and understanding how different operating strategies, different use patterns can impact that, also opened the space for entirely new use cases, be it second life in the stationary storage, which would increase the residual value of the battery. You're saving recycling costs, for example, for the OEMs, or can a change in the using pattern, for example, from a taxi driver almost using it fully every day towards someone who's only using part of the battery over time, could that help in extending that lifetime and flattening this curve of the state of health decline? And that's what Christoph also referred to. It's often not so much on learning what current status, how is the status, but also looking forward, how could different use behaviors impact that? Have you already seen aging effects in the battery that will lead to a rapid decline?
Okay, great. I think very interesting information. I think we're going to go a bit slightly over time, maybe with 3, 4, 5 minutes. So I just want to leave the last 2 questions for Christoph that we still do, because I think everyone's waiting to hear you now say what's the impact on the transactional value about these different scenarios.
Yeah, so the famous "what's in it for me" slide. Yeah, so there is a value that comes on top of having a great warranty for a battery electric vehicle if we have a credible, audited battery health report, which really tells you about the remaining quality in the battery. And what we have done here is we've simulated on the left side in percentage terms impact, and on the right side in euro values. And the left bar in each of these charts, that represents the worst treatment of the battery scenario. It doesn't mean that the battery is literally actually treated worse, but it's what buyers assume the treatment of the battery has been, or their willingness to pay. Because if they have no way to find out about it, then this is what they will pay. And that's what is currently the value in our system, but it's also the value in other suppliers of residual value information system. Now, if we have a strong signal towards better treatment of the battery, and Lennart showed us curves and how they can look better or worse. So if we translated this into residual values, then we have upside potential here, and no downside potential, by the way, of 450 euro, which is sizable. It's substantial. It's not more, because we do have a strong signal already in place, but it's only win-win. I mean, this can only come on top of values. So the big challenge is now to implement that additional information, which is credible, which is authentic and auditable about the true status of the battery health, of the health of the battery. And again, win-win situation. So nobody needs to worry about it. It can only go up.
Okay. Now, as a final slide, maybe, and if you could be brief, if possible, can you give us 4 or 5 points on how the industry can support this good transaction?
Absolutely, and I've just shared the link to the white paper in the chat function, where you can all read up on it again if you want. So, I mean, first of all, if we're looking at fleets that are remarketing cars, they can do or they can implement a better or worse treatment of the battery, sort of like they implemented excess mileage. So if people treat the battery better, then they can get a bit of a bit of money back. And everybody's happy. Again, win-win. Remarketing looks better, and encouragement is there to treat the car well. So it's obviously in the interest of the leasing companies and those that have remarketing risks on their books to have higher residual values for electric vehicles. So that should be no question. So if there is a solid concept available for fleets to buy into, or to run through with their cars, it's not going to be a problem. It's going to be only additional profit. Used car buyers, they will be looking for a battery health report. If they are willing to pay more money for a better treated battery and less for a worse treated one. So that should be also quite clear. And OEMs, I mean, those are the parties that also have to come on board here to provide that extra bit of transparency in terms of, being open for it. And again, the reminder here, it's a win-win situation. Residual values for BEVs cannot go down. Actually, it's a virtuous circle instead of a vicious one if we start encouraging better treatment and also giving credit for better treatment of batteries.
Okay, Christoph, I'm sorry that I'm going to cut you here. I'm sorry, but indeed,
I was going to stop.
link to the paper, which I believe is great. People can have a look at this, and I would like to thank both of you for, I think, this very interesting sharing, and I think it opens it up for people wanting to know more. So stay with us, see you later, talk to you later, and you can answer any more questions in the chat. Thanks very much.